Hello and welcome to another Writer's Showcase. I am your host, Lord Captain Commander Dunn, and I'm very excited to bring on my various guests. First off, please welcome the man, the myth, the legend, the man who can do accents far better than I can. Please welcome Carl Saylor.
He's not wrong.
Indeed. Indeed. And going back to actually an old intro that he gave me, please welcome Tarek.
我が力、我が刃、我が狂気、我が狂気をもて見解せよ。エクスはあ、うがせエクスプロージョン。
You want to know the ultimate irony of using that today is?
What?
We had to put the cat down today.
Oh.
Aww.
I'm so sorry.
No, I just find it almost cosmically hilarious that the one day you decide to use that clip is the day we put the cat down.
That does have a measure of both humor and sadness. I agree.
Wow.
It's
Damn.
what the poor fellow or lady would have wanted.
Yeah, she really did. Because like I'm not exaggerating. The moment they put that first injection in, she was just gone.
Okay, well that's at least something. Okay. And, we have our good new friend, writer on stream. Please welcome Cameraman.
I've played that game.
Hello, it is everyone's favorite eldritch horror, the man who is also a camera.
I see.
I like it. Alrighty. So boys, shall we get started? Does anybody have any time constraints that I need to be made aware of?
Not as far as I know.
I've
Okay.
got a really long one, like 3,000 words.
Okay, let's let you go first then.
All right. Very well. Okay. We are returning to the waters of Acre, although we're not going to be in Acre for this chapter. This is chapter 26, Sparks Valley. Karna and Shenna didn't get very far up the river before the shades of evening began to close in about them. Having spent the past few months in Acre, Shenna had forgotten just how dark it got at night out here in the countryside. Within the space of an hour, the rolling moorland and distant mountains were completely hidden behind an impenetrable cloak of shadow. "How much longer before we put ashore for the night?" Shenna asked. "We won't," Karna said, lighting a small red lamp and hanging it at the prow of the boat. "Stopping for the night will double our travel time. No need for that." "What?" Shenna blinked. "But we need to sleep, don't we?" "Our pilot doesn't," Karna said, returning to the cargo packs and pulling out a pair of blankets for the two of them. Shenna glanced up at the undead man, still standing at the stern. The purple glow from his eyes was even more prominent in the darkness. "And you're sure he's not going to have a problem with the dark?" "It won't run out of energy, if that's what you're asking," Karna said. "I've made this journey a good number of times already. It'll be well into tomorrow before we need to reinfuse the pilot." "And we won't get lost or drift off course?" Shenna asked. "Of course not," Karna said. "There's only one direction to go. As for forks in the river, most of the tributaries are too shallow for navigation. We'll ground out before we get too far off course. There is only one significant tributary, And there's a small trading post at the confluence, so we can easily set our course by it. If you say so, Shana sighed resignedly. The last object Karna produced from the cargo packs was a small device in the shape of two brass bowls pointing away from each other and standing on three stubby red legs like a low stool. Shana recognized the shape from one of the books she had read. A heater. Karna dropped a single small crystal into the top bowl, and within moments a thin red ring sprang into being around the center of the device, like a contained fire. A gentle warmth wafted forth from the glowing torus, a warmth which neither rose nor dissipated into the air, unlike ordinary, non-magical heat. With this last need seen to, the two travelers wrapped themselves in blankets and lay down around the heater to rest. Sleep was not swift in coming to Shana. She'd grown accustomed to working late into the night, both from transcribing Karna's notes and from working in the Moonspire during the break. Instead, she lay awake, staring up at the star-strewn tapestry of the heavens and listening to the soft sounds of the waters and the wandering winds. After a time, Shana rolled over so that her back lay towards the heater, and that was when she noticed the distant pinprick of violet light swooping about like a shooting star against the blackness of light. Shana slowly, carefully sat up, not wanting to wake Karna, and peered out across the river. She fished her hand into a belt pouch and drew out her glass moon. She'd taken to carrying it with her wherever she went, and had grown accustomed to its convenience. Shana watched as the purple light from Athanasius's eye drew closer as the bird glided low over the dark waters, until finally he swooped up to come to a perch atop the gunwales. Such a loyal friend to have come all this way to accompany her. Shana was about to reach out to give his head a stroke when Karna suddenly let out a drowsy grunt and turned over in her sleep. All at once, Athanasius jumped up and scrambled to take wing, gliding over to the riverbank. Within moments, he was again just a pinprick of light against the blackness. Shana glanced back at Karna. She was still fast asleep. Then, cupping her hands around her mouth, she whispered, "Ath, it's okay. She didn't wake up." But the distant violet flame came no closer. Occasionally it would bounce along the water's edge as Athanasius hopped along the shore after the boat, but he never approached again. He's afraid of Karna. Shana could hardly blame him. Ath probably still remembered that horrible chain Karna had put on him when they first arrived at the Magisterium. Shana knew well enough how memories of that horrible sort could linger long. The next day dawned coldly beneath an iron-gray sky. They continued north along the river all day, only stopping to answer the call of nature, or to reinfuse their pilot, or to fetch mud for Manamborsa. Shana gradually became resigned to the empty, non-taste of Manamborsa, though she began to keep a careful eye along the riverbank for any wild rosemary or sage that she might at least use for seasoning. Karna quickly declared during breakfast that she would keep Shana busy with quizzes and deep discussion during the journey. Of course, the academic discussion lasted for only a half an hour or so, before Karna lapsed into a haphazard stream of bellyaching about her treatment at the hands of the Magisterium. They'd never believed in her, so she claimed, when she first revealed her plans for construct labor, and they still refused to consider the full potential of her work, even now, while they reap tremendous profits from their labors. And really, how hard was it to just expand their capacity to account for the increased expenditure of magic? Whiners. Whiners all. Shana obediently listened as Karna's ire passed over each magister in turn. Some accusations met with Shana's eager agreement, such as when Karna derided Magister Parnulf as an empty-witted old dotard who should have long since been put out to pasture, or called Magistress Renellith a tiresome librarian. there were plenty of other names that Shenna only dimly recognized, such as Magister Gelwin, a miserly little Herrick hoarder, Magister Cadlor, an up-jumped stonecutter with stones in his head to prove it, and Magistress Sendine, a constant backstabber and inveterate turncoat. Not even Magister Bandros himself escaped Karna's wrath. Apparently he was mismanaging the magisterium in a number of critical aspects, the details of which Karna apparently considered too obvious for discussion. When Karna reached Magister Forlek, who she deemed a nasty, whip-tongued little pest, then Shenna felt compelled to speak up. "Well, that's not quite fair," Shenna said. "I found his style of rapid following questions quite engaging. It really helped to keep focus on the material." "Ah, yes, of course," Karna nodded. "Well, I suppose each of us has our own way of going about our lessons." "I learned quite a lot from him," Shenna quickly added to her defense. "And Magister Rennick, too. His lessons are most engaging." "Rennick," Karna laughed. "A waste of a perfectly good mind, that one. So much potential there, and yet he's content to while away his whole career, obsessing over coinage like a bloody magpie. And what's more..." Shenna saw little point in raising any other objections after that. Later in the day, the sky finally made good on its threat of chilling rain. Karna had prepared for this, of course, and quickly produced a pair of light traveling cloaks. Shenna watched as Karna threw on the cloak and clasped shut the jeweled brooch at the neck, and then stared in amazement as the rain suddenly stopped landing on the woman. Indeed, the droplets seemed to land above her, and then slid away as though there were some sort of unseen barrier floating barely a finger's width above her skin. "I make a habit of never leaving the magisterium grounds without a weather cloak," Karna said as Shenna donned her own cloak. "And better to have and not need, than to be caught in the rain, as it were." The rain continued all afternoon, finally spluttering out just before Karna and Shenta went to sleep that night. The rain returned early the next morning, not that it proved much inconvenience. Indeed, Shenna noticed to her tremendous relief that the falling rain tended to render much of Karna's ranting mercifully inaudible. As the days passed, the distant mountains crept steadily closer, until by the morning of the third day, they towered from impossible heights on either side of the river. Shenna found herself constantly staring up at the slopes, wondering what might happen if one of those tremendous boulders would slip out from underneath their scrubby vegetation to thunder down the slope towards them. "Not much longer now," Karna said through mouthfuls of Manamborsa. "We should arrive just before midday." Sure enough, just as the sun peeked over the jagged teeth of the eastern mountains, the boat rounded one more bend in the river, and the travelers were met by a tight cluster of stone buildings pressed up against the water's edge. Beyond lay a small town, squeezed between the shore and a slope that was pockmarked with what looked like mine shaft entrances. Eventually, the boat pulled up alongside the long stone wharf, beside a heavily laden cargo barge. A pair of boat handlers tied up the boat as Karna saw to the undead pilot. Once that was taken care of, Shenna and Karna dismounted. So, this was Sparks Valley. "You there!" Karna shouted at a procession of dockhands hard at work unloading the cargo barge. "I've a shem for the fellow who wants to run a message for me." The entire company stopped at once, and one quick-heeled boy dashed out of the line to present himself before Karna. "Find Magister Donwill, and tell him that Magistress Karna has arrived with the shipment he requested." The boy nodded and dashed off into the town. Shenna took a moment to look around. This was, after all, only the second village that she had ever seen in her life, with Acre as an obvious exception. The first thing that stood out were the buildings. Back in Riverwatch, one of these houses, all stone with a fine slate roof, would have seemed like the pinnacle of luxury. Of course, stone was probably terribly cheap up here, and with no trees to be seen for miles around, ordinary wooden houses from Riverwatch might conjure up the same sentiments up here. Come to think of it, what did they eat up here? It didn't look like there was much in the way of good farmland nearby, and there couldn't possibly be enough wild game in the mountains or fish in the river to support a significant population. Well, they probably trade for their food, Shenna supposed, glancing back at the cargo barge, and the men pulling out crate after crate, carrying them into a nearby warehouse. Perhaps the mines were truly lucrative enough that the town could afford to import everything it needed. Riverwatch wasn't so different, I suppose. There were plenty of goods that couldn't be produced in Riverwatch or could be gotten more cheaply in trade. Of course, if the trade were ever interrupted, Riverwatch could at least continue to feed itself. Sparks Valley, on the other hand... "Colonel!" a voice called out. Shenna turned to see a rotund man in a black magister's robe lumbering down the street, followed by the boy Karna had dispatched minutes earlier. "I was wondering when you'd turn up again." "Don will," Karna greeted the man with a cordial handshake as he reached the wharf. "A pleasure, as always."
"So, what do you have for me this time?" Donwell asked as the party returned to Karna's boat.
"I believe it was ore cutters you asked for last time we met," Karna said, "unless the situation has changed."
"It hasn't changed," Donwell said. "Gotten only more pressing, in fact."
"Not to worry," Karna said, pulling back the tarpaulin to expose the undead worker. "I think you'll find this one much better than the others. Hasidin picks out only the best ones for me."
"He does indeed,"
Donwell muttered as he looked over the dead man.
"As you do you, Karna. I must admit you've become quite an asset to the Magisterium."
Shenna wondered if Magister Donwell would be speaking so highly of Karna if he knew that 2 days earlier she had called him a lazy old donkey who more than deserved his exile.
"Well then, let's get this fellow to work," Magister Donwell said. "The sooner we get all that ore cut again, the better."
Within minutes, a nearby pair of cargo haulers was hefting the tarpaulin-wrapped body onto their shoulders and carrying it through the streets with Donwell and Karna and Shenna following along after them. The streets seemed unusually quiet for the time of day. There were no merchant stalls or market carts to be seen. There were barely a dozen or so people out and about. A few simple shops were open for business, but just as many looked like they were shut up, probably for a long time. And as the street began to climb up the mountain slope, some of the houses began to show signs of neglect. Glass windows were fogged over with dust or broken. Doors hung ajar with shattered latches clearly visible, and at least 2 showed collapsed roofs. The cargo haulers eventually reached one of the mine shaft entrances up along the higher slope and set down their cargo beside the entrance. Karna and Shenna set about unwrapping the construct and applying the first infusion of magic. Then, at Karna's instruction, Shenna took the newly found construct by the wrist. That was the proper way of moving constructs about. And then Magister Donwell took up a lamp hanging by the entrance and squeezed himself somehow into the mine entrance, with Karna, Shenna, and the construct following after into the passage.
"Watch your head now, ladies,"
Donwell said as the party entered the mine. Shenna ducked, though more to follow Donwell and Karna's example. She wasn't nearly tall enough for the low ceiling to be an issue, and in any case the absence of sunlight was a far more pressing concern. Once again, Shenna pulled out her glass moon, relief washing over her as the tunnel filled up with that silvery light that only she could see. She had taken
"We lost an ore cutter to a cave-in about a month ago," Donwell said as they entered into a larger chamber. "We managed to recover the tools, but the construct itself was unfortunately beyond repair. Ever since then, we've had haulers standing idle for want of useful labor, as I'm sure you can see.
Donwell gestured as they passed a long procession of men with large baskets hanging from their shoulders, all standing before a small pile of rocks. The man at the front of the queue carefully loaded the ore into his baskets, while the 3 other men with pickaxes refilled the pile with fresh ore from the chamber wall. When the man was done loading his baskets, he stepped away and marched out of the chamber with his full baskets. And the entire queue took a mechanical step forward, and the new man at the front went about loading his own basket. Every single one had the telltale purple glaze flickering across his eyes. There were only 3 living people in the whole mine, for all Shannon knew. "Right then," Karna said as the party reached the wall. "Where shall we set this one?"
Right up here,
Donwell said, indicating a section of the chamber wall next to the other ore cutters. Shenna aligned the construct exactly as instructed, and as Donwell placed a pickaxe in its hand, it began the monotonous work of tapping away at the ore. The only task it would ever perform again, until it either rotted away or succumbed to another cave-in.
Well, I believe we're done here, Donwell said, turning to depart. Again, I must thank you both. I'm sure your new construct will prove a great asset to our operations.
"Thank you, Magister," Shenna said, and then timidly added, "If you don't mind me asking, is the mine running out?"
Magister Donwell perked up, actually sounding surprised. Well, why would you think that now, darling?
"Well, it looks like you've mentioned having haulers standing idle for a time," Shenna said. "And it looks like the town isn't doing very well either, so I thought that maybe the mine was giving out."
Why, quite the opposite, in fact, Magister Donwell said, happily, as they emerged into the sunlight once again. Why, we're more productive than ever, thanks to these marvelous constructs, and our operating margins are lower than they've ever been. They don't need wages, food, or housing when off shift. Why, they don't even go off shift. We're having issues with the balancing of the numbers and ore cutters, of course, but it's far better than what we were doing a year ago.
"Well, that's good," Shenna said, though she wasn't sure if she truly believed it. It seemed impossible that the town could be suffering so while the mines prospered. But the reality was impossible to avoid. It was plainly visible in the abandoned houses, the dwindling market square, the crumbling cobblestones, the haggard stray dogs that sadly wandered the desolate alleyways. Even the dock hands at the riverside knew it. The truth lay heavy on their faces like a shadow. Sparks Valley was dying. Karna and Shenna bade farewell to Magister Donwell as they reached the docks, and set off back again on the river without delay. Before long, the withering town had vanished behind a bend in the river, forgotten. "So, what did you think of our mining operations?" Karna said. "I think it's the clearest evidence of the full potential of undead labor, don't you?" "Well, it seemed a little clumsy," Shenna said. "Clumsy?" Karna sounded offended. "However so?" "Well," Shenna shrugged, I noticed all of those haulers standing idle waiting for their loads to be filled. That struck me as rather wasteful." "Oh, well, of course there are inevitable issues with properly balancing the different component tasks, of course," Karna admitted. "But still, it's a tremendous improvement from relying on ordinary miners." "Well, maybe so," Shenna said. "But still, the process could definitely be made more efficient if there were some means by which constructs could be, retasked, I suppose." "And how would that even work?" Karna scoffed. "It's taken long enough to figure out how to make constructs perform even a single continuous task. I can't even begin to imagine how much longer it will take before we could make a construct switch between 2 of them." "Well," Shenna shrugged, "what if a construct were were designed with a number of basic actions that could be triggered in sequence from some sort of list of commands. And what kind of basic actions? Karna asked. Oh, never mind, Shinna said. Just a foolish thought. No, keep going, Karna pressed, no longer scoffing. Which basic actions would you include on your hypothetical construct? And for that matter, how would your list of commands work? I imagine the point would be to be able to switch one list out for another, yes? And then there's the issue of... Karna continued questioning Shinna for hours, picking away at every core concept, every potential pitfall, every errant detail that she could identify. More than once, Shinna tried to back out of the conversation, overwhelmed by the woman's passion, but there was no escape from Karna's hunger for innovation. Finally, Karna fished out her great book of academic ramblings and began scrawling down a hasty battery of notes. Well, Shinna, Karna said, I must say you've truly outdone yourself. I've said it before. I knew there was something special about you, and here's the proof. This concept of yours might just be the very thing to make our undead constructs accessible to the masses. We stand here at the precipice of a new epoch, and all thanks to you. You honor me, Magistress, Shinna said, blushing. Karna closed the book with a satisfied thump. When we return to the Magisterium, I'm pulling you out of your other courses, she said. You shall work with me to refine this new design with no external distractions. What? Shinna stammered. But the examinations are coming up soon. What about... Oh, we'll leave those for some other course cycle, Karna said dismissively. Besides, you can always dig that knowledge out of a book somewhere. And that's that.
Interesting development. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry,
You know-
Go
Oh, hi.
ahead, Wissia.
All right. Yeah, no. Sorry for being late today. Had some shit to take care of. But thankfully, I'm
Nice.
here now. Anyway,
You took your
Carl,
time.
I actually have some questions in regards to this plot. Is there,
Sure. Go ahead.
do they have a method to prevent decomposition or to get rid of the scent at the very least?
There's probably some way to get rid of the scent, I would imagine. Putrefaction would be a bit of an issue.
Mhm.
There's probably some sort of like embalming fluid.
Yeah, I suppose. Also,
You mentioned that there is that eventually, after like a decade or so, the bodies tend to sort of shrivel up.
interesting. So basically, they will need to be constantly replenishing these,
Yeah.
which could also lead to some extreme ethics concern, considering, if I remember correctly, these bodies were being collected from the prisons.
Only the high quality ones, most, like, if you're doing simple things just for like low intensity repetitive work, you can just get them from anywhere. Get them from like a regular coroner's office or something like that. But for high quality work, like the mining and stuff like that, very labor intensive stuff, you'd really need to spring for the good ones.
Interesting, because where is this going to lead? Because I can easily imagine that this is going to lead to a system of government whereby it's incentivized to be constantly replenishing these constructs by literally sacrificing members of its own populace in order to transform them into undead automatons that do all of its labor. So that way, this small collection of people on top can become hilariously wealthy.
Well, I think you're definitely going down the right path.
Yeah.
I've said multiple times that the zombies, the undead construct labor, is very much an allegory for not just automation but also the prison industrial complex.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's spot on.
And
I
we're going to
actually
be
once
seeing a whole lot more of that as that.
in high school I once wrote I believe I once did like a paper on the prison industrial complex.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Nasty.
Yeah, so this guy being so eager and actually entertaining the idea, it's quite disturbing when you really think about it.
Of course. Of course.
Like all this shit is very, very disconcerting and concerning. So you're definitely doing a very good job portraying the immorality of these people and so in their stunning eagerness to actually get this shit up and running. Which, oh my god.
Well, I've also mentioned that the one of the things that basically the way that constructs end up working is basically like robots. So the system of magic they come up with is basically computer science. And so what Shenna basically proposed is sort of like the early computers. Instead of having, constructing each machine for us to do one specific thing, you would instead have an architecture where you just have a series of commands, and you would, feed instructions into a processor based on those commands. It's basically the first assembly language.
Interesting. Yeah, definitely. Well, definitely looks like you've thought this through. But at this point, I expect nothing less.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your confidence.
Anytime.
Cameraman, I don't know if you've looked at any of the previous ones, but I think this is the first time you're hearing any of this story, right? You have any serious questions? Anything stand out? Or...
No.
He died.
Well,
just-
I jinxed him.
Yikes.
So much
Well-
for a Lovecraftian monstrosity. Dude folded like a house of cards.
My god. I can't wait. I'm only gonna say is I can't wait for the sequel where some guy by the name of Carl writes a manifesto on the immoralities of this system and starts a movement to overthrow the greedy people up on top.
I've gone on record multiple times saying this story is a one and done.
Ah. Well,
Don't worry. We'll get there.
yeah. Well, at least we
We'll
get
get
ourselves a nice cautionary
there.
tale in the meantime. Cameraman has returned.
I was trying to unmute myself and I think I accidentally pressed the leave button.
Oh, boy. Yeah, that would.
Yeah,
that's-
I didn't realize I was muted, so I was talking and I think I was here the last time there was a writer's showcase. So I guess I'm still new, but this is technically my second time. Maybe I did hear something. It sounds familiar. I guess in terms of feed, I like how fleshed out your world is.
Any
It feels,
any questions? Any things you would like cleared up?
yeah, I guess generally, how does magic work in this world? Since that was brought up.
Yes, this is the big thing. Magic is basically it comes from the moon, so you have to and you store it in crystals. So you have to put the crystal inside a platinum basin to concentrate moonlight into the crystals, and then once you fill up the magic in the crystals, then you can do whatever you want with it.
Nice. Using
But basically,
platinum.
the way to collect it is to the thing about the glass moon, basically a light that gives a light that only the person holding it can see. That is something that's sufficiently optimized that it doesn't need a platinum basin. You can just hold it up to the moon. But for anything with any significant energy consumption, You have to actually, concentrate the moonlight with a platinum basin and collect it in a crystal before you can do anything with it.
Deal. Anyway, the reason why I pointed out to that is because platinum is just such an underrated metal.
Oh yeah, the first 6 chapters I called it moon silver
Hmm.
because
Yeah,
I
that's
mean
pretty
obviously peasants off in the boonies won't know about platinum and other fancy words like that.
Yeah.
Anyways. Any last words before we move on?
No, pretty straightforward. I like it.
Yeah, I guess all I could say is just apologize for not being over here sooner. I missed like 75% of the chapter, unfortunately.
Mhm. It does seem as though the book is kind of, at least like what Wasia described is actually what very similar to Amonkhet from Magic the Gathering, where they have a ritual basis of having people die for the god Pharaoh, and eventually it turns out, oh, their bodies have been embalmed in magic lapis lazuli in order to make it so that he Nicol Bolas, the Thanos / Team Rocket of Magic the Gathering, can create his own army of undead warriors.
Well, we'll get to the military stuff at some point.
Oh god, that's right. The implications for the freaking army. My
All right.
god.
Okay, we should move on. I'm
Magic
just going
off-
to say
magic-
one last thing here. That the next chapter after this one, is the reason I wanted to write the book.
Ooh, I am very excited.
Magic Oppenheimer is gonna create some nukes.
Oh, we'll get to there. We'll get to there.
Well, consider me hooked then.
All right. Let's go clockwise.
Sure, Derek, you're up.
All right. So it's been about a good 2 months since I've been here. So last time I was on the show, we had the chapter where Aviana met the cook of the Scattered Star named Orin, and she also discovered that someone was trying to buy out some space in the basement of the Scattered Star, but the proprietorship was not having any of it, did not want anything to do with these kind of people. She also, the chapter before that, we also learned that she was going to be starting school, and that's where that takes us to today. So, give me 1 second. All right. Aviana smiled as she walked through the door to the Alchemist Union. Even though she had been to the hall several times before on deliveries, going there never failed to put a smile on her face. She found it fascinating to see the various glass vials and beakers filled with brightly colored liquids, along with other alchemical instruments sitting on their various workspaces. There you are. I was worried something happened to you. Aviana turned her head in the direction of the voice and saw Raquela walking toward her wearing a dark yellow dress. Oh, good morning, Raquela. Aviana said, bowing her head. Good morning to you as well. Are you ready to begin your first lesson? I am, Aviana said excitedly. She shifted her eyes to the various texts and documents that aligned the bookcases in the back of the room. Excellent, Raquela said with a motherly smile. Then go upstairs. Master Lucian will be arriving soon. Wait, are you not teaching me yourself? Aviana asked, unable to hide her disappointment. As much as I would love to oversee your education personally, I sadly lack the time. Though I will be more than willing to provide you with any help you should need. All right, I understand. Thank you for giving me this chance, Lady Wayne, Aviana said, bowing her head once again. You are most welcome, my dear, Raquela said before walking back to her workstation. Aviana slowly walked between the workstations, taking the opportunity to quickly observe the men and women tinkering with their various tools. None of them paid her any mind and kept focusing on the task in front of them. The only alchemist who did acknowledge her was the one she stopped to watch grinding plants into a mortar. The woman gave her a mean look, and Aviana jumped and resumed the walking towards the staircase. I really hope they teach me to use some of these things, Aviana said excitedly to herself as she began ascending the staircase. Aviana opened the door to the Union's classroom and found herself in a large room with several rows of long wooden desks with little benches underneath them. The rows of desks led further into the room before ending at a large wooden podium with a high chair behind it. Aviana gripped the side of her pants as she quickly walked through the aisle between the desks. Unlike the alchemist downstairs, it was far more likely she'd have to interact with these other students. If she could just go throughout the day without giving her name to anyone, she would consider her first day a success. During her walk, she noticed a majority of the other students were about her age, though there were a few that appeared to be much older as well. She walked down the aisle until she found an empty seat next to a girl with curly brown hair running down her back. She was also sit next to a girl wearing a dark purple dress with curly brown hair running down her back. She took a deep breath and steeled herself as she approached the girl. Then she stood next to her. "Excuse me?" Aviana said softly. The girl gasped in surprise, nearly jumping out of her seat. She turned her head to revealing that she was just about Aviana's age. She was a young, homely-looking girl with soft, milky skin and bright hazel eyes. Her brown hair formed curly bangs just below her forehead, and on her neck was a beautiful golden pendant with a red jewel embedded in it. Aviana stiffened at the sight of the pendant, but quickly shook the memory away. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you," Aviana said apologetically. It's all right," the girl replied meekly. "Would it be all right if I were to sit next to you?" The girl nodded, though looked reluctant to do so. "Thank you," Aviana said with a smile that the girl didn't return. Instead, quickly turning back to her worn-looking book on her desk, biting her bottom lip. Aviana took her seat next to the girl and noticed that she was biting her lip harder every time she looked over at Aviana. When Aviana looked down at her desk, she found a small yellow book in front of her. Aviana reached for the book but stopped. Would she get in trouble if she touched the book before class? She looked up from the desk at the lines of desks and benches leading towards the podium, which now felt as though it was staring down at her with like a disapproving parent. Yet, when she turned her attention back to the book in front of her, it was almost as though the yellowed cover was teasing her, tempting her with whatever secrets it held. Cautiously, she touched the book, then quickly withdrew her hand, expecting the girl next to her to suddenly berate her. When she didn't seem to notice, Aviana took one last glance across the room, then slowly opened the cover of the book, sighing in relief as no one seemed to care. Shaking with excitement, she slowly turned the pages, flipping past the various words and paragraphs, until she finally came to a page with a picture. It was a painting of what appeared to be Tyrion in white robes, gesturing to an empty field with a collection of disheveled men and women. Just as she was about to look for another picture, she heard the door open behind her, and turned in time to watch a man entering the room. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and muscular forearms with fair skin. His face housed a thick black beard that covered his cheeks and chin, as well as the top of his head. The dark blue coat covering his gray shirt danced in the air as he walked through the rows of desks and other students. As the man passed by, Aviana saw that nestled in his left arm were 3 books, all in pristine condition as though they had just been printed that morning. "Good morning, everyone," the man announced in a loud but friendly voice as he arrived at the chair in front of the room. "Good morning, Master Lucian," a large majority of the class said in unison. Aviana sunk in her seat as she noticed that even the girl next to her had joined in with the greeting. "I see we have some new apprentices joining us here today." The man turned to face them, placing his books on the podium. "For those who are joining us for the first time, my name is Edgar Lucian. I am the primary instructor for the Alchemist Union." Excuse me, Master Lucian. I thought we were going to be taught personally by our masters." An older boy's voice called from the back of the room. And you will, but for our purpose here is to teach you more about the outside world instead of just alchemy. What do you mean by that? A girl called from the back called out. Does anyone know what a philosopher is? Aviana watched as several students looked at each other confused. It's a person who's experienced in many fields and has an understanding of the world, the girl next to Aviana answered. Very astute, young lady. It's the Union's hope that you won't all become alchemists, but philosophers. That's why I volunteered my time to teach you, not only the basics of alchemy, but other sciences as well. But that doesn't answer why they aren't teaching us, a young man's voice spoke out. That's because, I'm sorry to say, I doubt many of you will remain in this course long enough to become an actual apprentice. A worried murmur broke out, only to stop when Master Lucian raised his hand. Many potential students have quit the Union over the ages because it was deemed too difficult or dangerous. So it was decided to teach one large class under one teacher. I apologize. So it was decided to teach one large class the basics, and that teacher would decide which student had the potential to become an alchemist. It's our way of getting rid of those who we don't think will rise to our standards, whether it be through performances or examinations. Worry began to grip Aviana as she sank further into her seat. No one told her that she would be kicked out of the class if she didn't do well enough. Being an alchemist is not like being a blacksmith or a mason. As our understanding of the world grows, we must grow with it. For example, some medical treatments and techniques used for hundreds of years, even by those of the Union, have been discovered to actually have been poisoning people. Then why did Robert tell me why did Robert tell me you were teaching them about art last week? The older boy asked. Because alchemical work isn't the only thing that can lead to new discoveries. This is also why instead of just reading from alchemical texts, we also read from history, philosophy, and other works of literature. Alchemy is not just the profession of mixing things in a bottle. It is a profession that encompasses a wide variety of knowledge. As Master Lucian finished, Aviana was unable to contain herself. Excuse me? Yes, young lady, the man asked with a smile. I thought that was the purpose of the Black Scholars. Isn't it their job to understand how the world works? Aviana asked. A very good question, but no. The purpose of the Black Scholars is simply to record information. They seek out what others have already discovered, record and collect that information to share with others. They're not in the business of creating new discoveries on their own. Oh, so like Scalds, Aviana chimed in. An interesting comparison, but yes. Much like Scalds, they aren't creating new information, they're just recording it. Now, that isn't to say we don't work with the Black Scholars. In fact, often we do so just so our discoveries aren't lost if something should happen to us. Aviana felt giddy. She had only been in class for a few minutes, and she was already learning more than she ever had. Now, are there any further questions before we begin? Master Lucian asked. The room was silent. Very well. Then before we begin, I have a request for our new students. Raise your hand if you're new. Aviana raised her hand high into the air and saw several others go up as well, including some of the older students. All right, now keep your hand up if you can read. If you can't, place your hand down. Aviana grumbled as she lowered her hand and watched several others do the same, only leaving about 3 standing. I see. Well, then, I would like all of you who cannot read to stay after class is dismissed, so I can catch you up with the rest of the class, Master Lucian announced. For the time being, then, I want all of you to turn the book on your desk to page 156, where we will continue from our last lesson. Aviana heard the flipping of pages echo around the room, and she risked glancing at the girl next to her. She had just put her little brown book into her bag and turned to the page on her desk, to the yellow book on her desk. Once the girl stopped and looked up into the front of the room, Aviana noticed the pages under the number, as well as how far in the book she was. She carefully turned the pages until her numbers matched with the girl next to her. Her giddiness only continued to grow as Master Lucian began to read from the yellow book in his hand. After class, Aviana groaned as she walked out of the classroom, placing her back against the wall, her black bangs falling into her eyes. While the initial history lesson hadn't been too terrible and somewhat fascinating, the refresher lessons the other lessons regarding mathematics and sciences had been extremely difficult for her. Then, when class ended for the day, Master Lucian took all the new students and taught them something called phonetics. Instead of reading to them from a book, he instead wrote letters on a piece of parchment and gave them the corresponding sound of the letter. Many of the other students looked embarrassed to be there, including her. While embarrassing, it wasn't too bad until he made them recite the letters and try to sound out words. Every time she thought she was beginning to understand, he would throw her a word so complicated it made her head hurt, worse than any smack she had ever received from Silas. Then, when Master Lucian revealed that letters had different sounds when put together, she nearly ran away screaming. She sighed and looked out the window and across the hall and could see it was already late afternoon. The blue skies were beginning to give way to the darker orange shades of evening. Just then, Master Lucian walked out the door and locked it behind him, then took notice of her. "So, what did you think of today's lesson?" the man asked enthusiastically. "Oh, I enjoyed it. Thank you, Master Lucian," Aviana said, giving a small, awkward smile. "It was my pleasure. Now, since you know my name, it's only polite I know yours." Aviana sighed and hung her head low. "I am Aviana, sir. It's a pleasure to meet you," she responded. "Aviana," the man repeated before going silent. She was about to sigh at the fact that I've completely fucked that entire thing up. I apologize. But anyways, she sighed. "Ah, yes, you're the young lady Raquelo informed me about. You know, you're lucky. Under normal circumstances, you wouldn't be able to attend class without having the master within the union." I didn't realize that," Aviana said, blushing, feeling somewhat embarrassed. "I will say, though, I noticed you were struggling quite a bit." "I apologize, sir. This is all very new and confusing," Aviana admitted. "Well, I hope you aren't going to quit just because the first lesson was hard." Aviana shook her head. "Of course not. I really want to learn." "Good. We lose more students on their first day than any other. I must admit, though, for a Civet, you seem to have some interesting people speaking up for you. Though I suppose I shouldn't be surprised, what with the Chancellor being your sponsor and all." Aviana was taken aback. "It's not surprising that the Chancellor is sponsoring a Civet?" "Well, I suppose it's a bit unorthodox, but the man does love his little projects. You didn't think you were the first child he ever sponsored, did you?" Aviana shook her head. I had no idea he was doing this sort of thing for other people as well." Lucian laughed. "Lord and Lady Wayne have an interesting habit of taking the less fortunate, like yourself, and giving them opportunities. From what I hear, most other nobles consider them a pariah because of it." "And what do you think of them?" Aviana asked. "I think the Waynes are the kind of people we should all try to aspire to be. Why, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have joined the Alchemist Union myself." "Do you mean they sponsored you as well?" Aviana asked. Lucian placed a hand on her shoulder and winked. "Now, before I let you go, do you have any books to practice today's lesson with?" Lucian asked. "I have one, but there aren't a lot of words in it, mostly pictures." He nodded. "Well, I suppose I could let you borrow this one, if you promise to be careful with it," Lucian said, handing Aviana a yellow book, one of the yellow history books. Aviana took it in her hand, shocked. Are you sure?" "If the Chancellor trusts you, then so do I. Again, so long as you promise to take care of it." "I will, I promise," Aviana nearly shouted as she held the book tightly in her hands. She couldn't believe it. In just a week, she had 2 books, when for years she couldn't even imagine owning one. "Then I shall look forward to seeing you next class," Master Lucian said before walking away. Aviana looked down at the book in her hands, then held it closely to her chest, smiling brightly. And that's it.
The woes of studying English.
Yeah.
What a shitty language, by the way. Shame it's the only one I can speak.
Yeah, it's a weird language.
I once took a linguistics class in college.
Oh, interesting.
What you get
Well,
out of it?
anyway, let's not get sidetracked over here.
Yeah.
So, I think it's pretty nice. I liked it. Characterization was pretty well and good. We've got characterization of the who again? The Chancellor. It was.
You mean like who he was describing?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was he was talking about Marcel, the Chancellor. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's pretty great that we can get characterization for a guy who isn't even in this chapter. And we also got plenty of characterization for Aviana, who is just the sweetest little thing in the world.
Big protect this child energy.
Yes. Let's see. Honestly, it kind of... this is going to be mostly due to recency bias, but, you know, I kind of felt got some arcane vibes from this, but that's because me and my little brother are doing a rewatch of the entirety of season 1.
Never seen it, actually. Never played League either.
Oh shit! I forgot about that.
Back when I got home, during my first year of college, when I got home from to visit my family for like summer or Christmas or whatever, my mom had my brother had, I think he had watched the first season of Arcane as well as the first season of Squid Game.
Huh. That's pretty cool. Pretty good. But yeah, other than that, this chapter did its job pretty well.
Yep, we're both starting to hit over the same spots. I had my character learned to read very, very slowly, very painfully. Hopefully, it'll go easier for Aviana.
I'm imagining I think her first test is like after 3 months of schooling, like first actual like examination in reading.
Damn, that's gonna be interesting.
Mm-hmm. We're right at. I remember talking about this with Becca. We're right at the precipice of where children can't learn a language as easily. You know, if you teach them early, it's easier to read.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
absolutely.
The only reason I was stumbling so much was because it's been about 2 months since I did this. I did the edit in a weekend, and I got to tell you, it's been a tough like 2 months. That's why it wasn't as well done as I would normally do, as I normally like it to be. But it's a matter of it's a matter of getting back into the rhythm.
Yeah, I haven't been terribly productive the past 2 weeks.
Oh no, I've been extremely productive, but at work. But that's besides the point.
That's what I'm. Yeah, that's what I mean.
I've been reasonably productive, but on a different book.
Yeah, it's just been a matter of my mind has been somewhere else. But that's the reason why this one was really rough compared to the other ones. It was a lot of it was just a matter of getting back into the flow.
Well, I think back into the flow you have gotten into. And yes, that's the clunkiest thing I have said all day.
Nothing wrong with that sentence, I heard.
God damn it, Cart.
I will say one thing. Originally, this chapter was supposed to end with her going to see Raquela and actually finding out like who the girl she was sitting next to was. But Becca said that she liked the fact that, unlike a lot of the other, because the character she's sitting next to is actually an important character. But the fact that you don't learn about her, you kind of like, obviously this is director's notes or author's notes, but I do kind of like the fact that she's just this innocuous character. She's she's just one of the school students before you actually get to know about her.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was actually debating, I was redrafting a chapter recently where I had a character who meets a certain fate but she actually becomes very relevant later on, like what happens, kind of like a Boromir situation, you know? But I was debating in my...
bonus.
Huh?
A rewatch bonus.
Yeah, but I was also wondering, should I actually name her? Like, should I actually, in the text, should I refer to her by her name, or should I just leave her as woman, or as the woman, or as the Dominix, or whatever?
Well, if you're going to do a reveal later, no reason to give the name now. Like,
Yeah.
if it's just a small role.
Yeah, it really
Yeah.
depends on what her main introduction is going to be like. If it's if you're sort of going to ease into it, then it would be fair to introduce the name earlier. But do be sure to remind the people of it before, when she comes in for the proper introduction. But if it's going to be like a big thing, I would leave the name out just to save that up.
Yeah, because I was planning on utilizing it, the scene, for an emotional gut punch later on down the road. So,
And of course, you can always go back on it in editing.
yeah.
That's what editing's for.
Large chunks of this story have changed since editing, and they will be changing completely just because I didn't... God, I wish I had a plan when I first started this. I did not, and now it's going to take a lot longer.
Welcome to the fucking club, Tarek. Why do you think it's taken me 9 years, mate?
Because you're lazy?
He may be lazy, but at least he's not George R.R. Martin.
Yeah, but George R.R. Martin wrote Elden Ring. He still put something out.
But he doesn't actually. But he doesn't focus on what he actually should be focusing on.
Well, neither is Carl, but Carl's still putting something out.
Hey, I started my first book in 2015 and published it in 2019.
Nice.
Yeah, but that's a 4-year gap. His is 10.
I've put a bunch of stories on hold, and even the one I'm going to be presenting today isn't the one I was working on last session.
Why are you people defending Wissia so much? My God!
Well, because I literally redrafted the entire freaking thing. Like, I took the original, scrapped it, and started over from the beginning. So there you go.
Well, if that's what you did, well, why don't
That's
you
what you
show
did,
us?
yeah.
So let's get going.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. All right. Any other final thoughts, comments, real quick before we move on?
I think I'm good.
I'm good too. Yeah, we'll see you go.
I'm not typically interested in like fantasy school stories.
It's not a fantasy school story. It's just one chapter.
Yeah, just one chapter. Yeah. I'm glad that it's not a fantasy school story then, because those are typically really stupid.
Alright.
Well, we have some strong opinions. All right. Well, let's go to Wissia and his fantasy school. Sci-fi school story.
See, that makes all the difference.
Harry
It's all
Potter would have been
different.
very different if they were aliens instead of wizards.
Yeah, okay.
I can't
Maybe
argue
it
with
wouldn't.
that.
Maybe it wouldn't even be as overrated.
Possibly.
All right.
That's fair.
All right.
All right, so I think a quick recap is in order. So, our main protagonist, Rosa, has been trying to go back home for approximately 6 months now. And during this period, she has ran into a bit of an incident where someone tried to, assault and then murder her. She was required to take a mandatory period where she was required to take a mandatory vacation period, and immediately after was invited by the Chancellor of the United Systems Republic himself, so that way they can discuss her return back home. She has discovered that, yes, she will indeed be going back home very, very soon. And by very, very soon, he means approximately 6 months. And by the end of this conversation, the Chancellor Harun Rashid asks for her to be escorted away while he discusses things with Malik. Before I begin, I just want to preface this with I am taking a bit of a risk in this chapter. So bear with me. This is a bit of a long one. The door swooshed open for Lucia as she walked in, a clunking sound, a clunk sounding off with every step, and she saw her instantly. Tara was lying on a couch next to the fireplace on the other side of the room, wearing her white nightgown and reading through something on her tablet. A soft blue glow shone on her face, her eyes glued to the screen. Lucia scowled and walked up to her wardrobe. "Hey, Tara," she muttered. Blinking, the huntress removed an earpod and her eyebrows jutting up. "Oh, hey, Wiz. How do you go?" Lucia cracked open her closet, unveiling the scant clothing in her possession. "Well, went pretty well. Can't really come..." She blinked, spotting a black box on the shelf. She reached for it, picking up a luxurious leathery container with a shimmering silvery brand embedded on it. Lucia peered over her shoulder. This for me?" The huntress smiled. "Open up." Lucia's eyes darted back to the box and did just that, uncovering the thin wrappings and finding a magenta lingerie. Her cheeks flushed red as she pulled out the top. It came in a flare design, the material thin and satin, and, as expected, left little to the imagination. Befuddled, Lucia's jaw slacked as her brows narrowed. Tara?" She peeked over her shoulder and straight into her eyes. "Is there something you want to tell me?" The huntress blinked, her eyes darting to the top piece and back to Lucia. Then her eyes widened and she burst out laughing. "Oh my god, no! No! I just thought you should have something to wear instead of walking around without anything at all." Lucia squinted, taking another look at the intricate details and the flowery patterns of the semi-transparent top. "I know you can't cover up too much because you get warm easily, and that you like sleeping, well, in the nude, so I figured if I was going to get you something, it had to be pretty light and fancy, you know?" Lucia smiled. "Thanks, Tara," she paused, glancing at it. "Give me a second, let me get this thing on." "Sure thing," Tara replied as Lucia undressed and put it on. She shuddered, feeling the silky material gently caress her skin. "Madre de Dios, se sueba." She closed the wardrobe and tapped a panel, activating its mirror function. Lucia's cheeks flushed red. The attire accentuated her curvature, its pink color almost blending with her hair. She pivoted, peering over her shoulder and examining her backside. Tara watched her, still smiling. "So, you like it?" Lucia turned around, facing the mirror again. Her shoulders slacked, arms falling by her side, a frown forming across her face as the weight formed within. It feels wrong. I shouldn't have it." Tara groaned and rolled her eyes. "Oh my god, Lucia. Why can't you just enjoy having something nice for once?" Lucia's face paled. "Sorry, it's just that..." She paused, feeling it creep up her spine. The sensation came crawling out of the recesses of her mind, crushing and squeezing her in its frigid, icy grasp, draining the air from her lungs and the tears from her... "Hey!" Lucia blinked, seeing Tara scowl at her just before sighing. My bad," she muttered. "It just sorta..." "You're fine," Terra replied, lying back on the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling. Lucia, wearing a sullen expression, walked up to the couch across from Terra and lied back as well. She heard the rumbling of the vents, the hums of electronics, and the crackling of the fireplace. She felt her lungs expand and contract with every breath, and the pulse in her temples, until her ear twitched. So, Terra opened. Who was it that was so important that you just had to talk to? Lucia glanced at her before, with a sigh, she let it out. The Chancellor. Terra blinked, her face turning pale. No way. She sat up, looking at her. The Chancellor? Executive of the United Systems Republic? That Chancellor? Lucia pivoted her head to face her and nodded. Terra scoffed. Shit. Alec told me you're special, but that's special. She paused, giggling. Well, don't be shy. What'd he tell you? Lucia rolled her eyes. Nothing much, same as always. Just get this shit done within the next 6 months, and when you do, we'll send you back. Terra blinked, the smile fading away, her expression turning somber as her eyes dulled. Oh, is that so? Lucia shrugged. Guess so, but honestly, I'm not even sure if he'll stick to it. Something about him just felt... She paused, seeing Terra hunched over, her head hung. Lucia sprung up, lifting herself off the couch. Terra? You okay? The huntress was still, barely moving, her tone morbid. So, that's it. 6 more months, you leave, and I never see you again. Lucia's eyes watered, and her head hung. Then she heard a sniff. I know we didn't get off well when we first met. I mean, I wasn't a fan of you flaunting your girls around, and you were always so hot-headed and anxious, but... She paused, a tear streaming down her face as she sucked in her lower lip. But for once, I didn't feel so alone anymore. Lucia's shoulders dropped, her heart sinking. Hey, it'll be all right. We can always... No, it won't, Terra snapped, startling Lucia. Why there? Why that shithole of a planet? Lucia's brows pulled together as she glared at her. That shithole is my home. I have to go back. And what if something happens? Terra shouted hysterically. I almost lost you once. I'm not about to lose you like I... She paused, her lower lip quivering as she sealed her eyes. Lucia's heart wrenched, and she reached out for her. Terra, it's... Fuck it, the huntress uttered, shaking her head and catching her breath. It's time, she said, looking up at her. It's time I told you what happened. How I got here. Lucia deflated, the tension draining from her face. With her lips sealed, Lucia got up and sat beside her, placing a hand on her back. The huntress peered at her with glistening eyes. Finally, with a nod, Lucia answered back. All right, I'm all ears. Terra blew before steeling herself and taking deep breaths until she spoke. We were sent as part of a colonial effort. The Armaturician Alliance rediscovered Earth and wanted to re-inhabit it. We were expected to maintain regular contact with our home system, so everyone had to know how to fly a shuttle, she explained. Lucia nodded along, and Terra carried on. My family and I lived in a cabin. The inside of this room, that's where its looks came from. our small hometown, our small little town would send out scouts, explorers, you name it. Her eyes began to swell with tears, twitching and wincing as a slight quiver showed in her voice. It was 5 years ago. I was 21 when they came. These black metal monsters, like demons from hell. They just killed everyone in the town. Like we meant nothing. Lucia's pupils dilated, vividly seeing the image as Tara described it. They didn't spare anyone. The old, the sick, or even the kids. I was alone and scared for so long I barely remember a time I wasn't. Lucia closed her eyes, seeing the obsidian-armored soldiers who haunted her nightmares. And that planet, that shitty world you want to go back to. It was horrible. Everything's trying to eat you alive, and I don't know how those monsters you mentioned, Lucia said, interrupting her. They had red eyes, one more on their chest, and a ring around their head. Tara, stunned, looked at Lucia, witnessing the same shaking in her body as she felt now. They did. How did you? Lucia's eyes tensed, a tear rolling down her face. I see them in almost every nightmare I have, she explained, her voice subdued. I was always standing in the middle of a city on fire. Everywhere I looked, all I could see were bodies and debris. No one was spared, just like you said. They slaughtered them all. They also had a leader. He looked a lot like them, except he had more decorations and like 6 or something wings. Tara blinked, her eyes wide with disbelief. Wait, were you fighting them? By yourself? Lucia shook her head. No, there was this blonde, a gal with green hair, and She paused, not knowing how she connected the black-haired woman to the word sister. Tara sat there, waiting with bated breath, but Lucia's mouth didn't move. The fragments fitted together, her eyes becoming lifeless and her lungs hollowed as she pieced them together. That lady, she's my sister? And those soldiers there, the images finished forming in her head, clear as day to see. That's why I wanted to go back. I left my sister behind. Suddenly, Lucia got up, trying to keep her nerve. Instead, with a deep breath, she walked over to her bed. You know, I think that's enough for tonight, she remarked, walking to bed. Tara shook her head, perplexed and dumbfounded. Hold on, what happened to not shutting people out? Please, Lucia answered back, looking at Tara and feeling a swelling in her eyes. I'm not ready. Just give me some space. Tara, flabbergasted, let out a sigh and acquiesced. Fine. Good night, dream warrior. Lucia giggled and climbed into bed. Sleep tight, Tara. She threw the blanket over herself and sealed her eyes. It would take several minutes, but the pain within vanished, and the weight of her heart lightened. The levity relieved her mind of stress long enough to let the drowsiness settle in and take her away. All right, I'm going to go ahead and not let you guys suffer through the rest of this. Go and give me your thoughts.
Oh, come on, it wasn't that bad.
That was fine.
Personally, I don't know why, but I felt very out of it for this one.
Fair enough. Lucia, I gotta tell you something.
Yeah.
Your characters, all of them need some Xanax or something. They are always depressed. need some goddamn Xanax or something. Give them an antidepressant. Good lord.
I mean, to be fair, we would have been, if I continued on, we probably would have met somebody who was actually not in the slightest depressed and actually enjoying himself.
Yeah, he's on a ship with nothing but women, as far as I can tell. That's either very wonderful or very annoying.
Every weeaboo's fantasy that they can never achieve.
Sorry, man. I don't know why. I felt like the presentation was extremely, supremely off. Oh well.
I didn't mind. No, that was fine. Hot women who don't wear much. I think that's most males, straight males' fantasies.
I don't know. When you have an entire ship full of women backseat driving you, that sounds like hell.
That sounds like the only good harem manga.
I mean, I could continue if any of you guys would entertain it.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
finish it.
All right.
Shit.
This is going to be a bit unprecedented, but sure. It was bright, yet it was dark. The moonlight shone upon the young Gusi as she sat on the grass-covered mountaintop. Cherry blossom trees surrounded her in this landscape. The moon reflected in the pure pond before her, and fireflies lit up the areas the moon couldn't reach. She lay back and relaxed on the grass-covered ground. Then she heard her voice. Sitting next to her was a black-haired beauty of a woman. She was as endowed as herself, with a seductive smile and hair that twinkled like the sky above. She leaned in on Lucia, wrapping an arm around her in a sideways hug. Yet, in this bliss, Lucia heard a faint voice call to her. "Closer," he ordered. Getting up, Lucia listened to him, hearing the voice from the gorge below. "Rosa? Please, don't go," Maria warned with an audible concern, her accent serving to persuade Lucia otherwise. But, for some reason, she couldn't stop herself. She got up and walked silently into the black abyss. To her surprise, she was unharmed, yet she wasn't awake. Lucia found herself on a hot, rocky surface, and she had heard something else. A single, high-octane note from a piano. She listened, and the key was played again. The tune was slow in pace, somber and resentful. A flame ignited. A tiny bright ember burned violently at the bottom of the gorge. There was an eerie familiarity she had with the scene, for she instinctively approached it. The piece grew in complexity, with violins joining in, playing one long note at a time. She heard a strange howling sound in the gorge, one that passed by as fast as it came, like the voice of some distant ghost. Then she reached for it, burning her hand in the process. Fuck, it's hotter than I thought. The piano stopped playing, along with the violins. The ghastly cries now roared within the darkness. They whirled around her, becoming more distorted as the fire grew in size. Oh shit. It cut her off as the drums of the flames sounded. The fire reached out for her, grasped her, and bit at her flesh. She tried to snuff out whatever spark she could, fighting to retain consciousness. The raging blazes would reach for her, successfully engulfing her in their hatred. Yet, despite her best efforts, she would collapse to the floor and wake up. She gasped, wanting to see her room, to feel her cozy blanket, to tuck it in closer. Instead, she found herself strung up, two separate chains holding her arms apart, her body now subject to the arid, hot atmosphere. She struggled to break free of her chains, yet, as she struggled, She felt a mounting force press on her from all sides. Her heart began to race, her form shivering and trembling like a mild seizure. Then she felt them, frigid claws hovering over her shoulders and neck. Suddenly she heard it, a dark, ancient masculine voice that boomed from all around. "Be not afraid, Rosa." She shuddered. Her eyes darted around the room, scanning for something, anything. Then the hairs on her neck stuck up. She finally saw something that wasn't pitch black. A pair of crimson glowing eyes, shaped like daggers. "For you are home." The mechanisms whirled, and the eyes rose. Soon, metals clanked against the basaltic floor as the eyes grew larger. He was approaching her. Lucia's breathing became erratic, her pupils and eyes widening. It was him. "You recognize me?" She shook her head. "No, this can't be real. You can't be." "Oh, but I am, Rosa." He spoke aloud. "I am very real." Lucia blinked, hearing that name again. Why does he keep calling me that? She thought to herself, not breaking eye contact with the phantom. Then his eyes narrowed. "I see. I must be mistaken," the phantom snarked. "Your name?" Swallowing, Lucia stammered out in the answer. "Lucia." "Fascinating," the phantom replied, almost mockingly, before defaulting to a sinister tone. "Do you know mine?" he asked. Lucia sucked in her lips and shook her head. "El Seraph. Jaliel." She shut her eyes as the images flashed through her head. There was a group of burned bodies, 4 of them, the ruined cities, and the people lying scattered on the ground. The harmed woman, the screams and shrieks followed by swift immolation, and the monster at the center of it all was him. She opened her eyes, tears streaming from them. Yet he so callously carried on. "I trust Malik's younger sibling has already given you your mission." Lucia became staggered, her head lightening. She retreated back into her mind. Malik's younger sibling? Who the hell is he talking about? Laheba Abdullah. But you would have known him as Linen Volta, he answered, startling her. "The one you turned on? The one who gave you your assignment. You remember him, right?" Lucia shook her head. "What? That fucker? His brother? Wouldn't that mean?" Her form trembled and her stomach twisted. The implications came lunging into her mind before she became distracted by another question. "Hold on. If you know that, wouldn't that make you..." Her heart hastened and her eyebrows shot up. "My original commander." "Yes, it does," Jaliel answered. "But what do you want from..." It clicked in her head as she recalled Linen's demands from her. Lucia's eyebrows came together, almost snarling as she spat back. "I'm not killing him." Her eyes began to water once again. "I won't murder Malik." Jaliel's eyes narrowed. The air thickened and became hotter as his tone darkened. "A shame. After all I've done for you. Luring him in with Linen. Luring him in with Linen. Here, where you can be free of reprisals." He tilted his head. "We're even being offered a prize for his death. One we'll be sure to share with you." Lucia's eyebrows came together as her voice became hysterical. "Fuck you!" she roared, tears streaming down her face as her breath hastened. "I'm not about to murder someone and let you frame me." The phantom scoffed, and as though on cue, Lucia spotted a red flash. He held a device in his hand, one rod shape with a red blinking light at the end. A shame. I was hoping you wouldn't mind. What is that thing? Lucia demanded through her trembling, while Jalia laughed. Let's just say disobedience has explosive consequences. It could blow up in your face, if you will. Lucia's head lightened. Her emptying eyes were filled with the red flashing light of the detonator. She could hear it, feel it, the pulsing and beeping deep within her skull. Lucia stared into the phantom's burning eyes, her chest quivering with every breath. The images were vivid and horrific, sudden and violent. Lucia's eyes watered as she let out a token gesture of defiance. Even if I could, they won't believe you. You'll fuck it up somewhere. His eyes narrowed. Lucia suddenly felt the tension in her arms release. The sudden drop startled her as she fell to the floor. The phantom rose and left with his parting words. Oh, you poor child. If only you knew the insanity humans are willing to believe. A metallic clanking rang in the metallic clanking sound rang in the hollow chamber. Footsteps. Jalia left the room. The door sealed behind him, and Lucia left to freeze in the pitch black room. Okay, there we go. It's done.
Okay. A couple little editing things here and there, but overall, I think it was fine.
Yep.
I do like the kind of Faustian deal type thing, or enforced Faustian deal that we're getting right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, I was initially very, very proud of this chapter, specifically that second half, because of the characterization I managed to give Terra and all that stuff. But I'll go and let all of you speak for yourselves for this one.
I don't know. This character, it's I'm getting definitely a supernatural vibe off this guy. Is that accurate?
Yeah, pretty much. He's very much not of this world.
I always like how sci-fi deals with supernatural.
Yeah.
It's an interesting angle to take on these things. So yeah, I'm interested to see how this goes.
Yeah, I mean, I've always actually kind of liked how a lot of sci-fi tries to tackle the subject of religion, particularly in the far future and all that stuff, because, human people have this assumption that enlightenment means the loss of religiosity, and how religion tends to hold people back, both psychologically and developmentally and all that. And I actually kind of want to explore some of that a little bit. Actually ask the question, is that really the case? But yeah, no, that was to answer Balerian's question, that was in fact a dream sequence. It was actually, that bit over there was untouched. Like this, in this entire chapter, the one section I did not touch was the dream sequence, because how could I at this point? So,
Makes sense.
Right.
So I just kind of get a sense of Tara's the mom, or the kind of her roommate, right?
yeah, that is the relationship and dynamic between the two. In the previous chapters, she basically took Rosa out so that way they could hang out and try to get her mind off of the incident that occurred a few chapters prior. So I thought it would be in character that, hey, wouldn't it be interesting if Tara like just gifted her something, but Lucia took it the wrong way or something like that.
Mm.
All right, I can get that.
But yeah, that was the risk. When I said earlier I'm taking a risk with this chapter, the inclusion of that piece of clothing in there and that interaction, that was the risk.
Mm. That they would come off as lovers or something, or like that someone's angling, I guess you could say.
No, that's not what I meant by the risk. I mean, hold on, wait a second. If the reader reads through this, would it be taken out of the story? Would this be jarring? And of course, there's me actually having to present the thing. Tarek has been very, very quiet over there.
I got nothing to say. I have nothing to add.
Okay.
Yeah, looks good. All right.
I guess I like your reading voice.
Really?
Yeah, I think you do a good job narrating.
So, is any of you guys have any issues with the chapter itself? Like,
No.
content-wise?
Not particularly.
No.
Other than a few small grammatical stuff. No,
Yeah.
you're fine. I made sure to put the grammatical stuff I noticed, but otherwise the story is fine. I think the way you described is it Maria was kind of interesting, I guess.
Yeah. I guess I should probably go back and alter that a little bit so that way it doesn't come off wrong, I guess.
Yeah. I guess maybe kind of get a lady's perspective on how they think of other girls and how they compare themselves to other girls.
Yeah.
Since it kind of feels like it's a guy trying to think like a girl, describing another girl.
Yeah, I mean,
Beta
again-
readers always the answer.
Mhm.
huh?
Beta readers.
Yeah. Again, like I said, that bit of the story, I straight up didn't bother touching it. So, that's probably... so yeah, I probably should have altered that prior to presenting it. Yeah, any thoughts on Terra's characterization over there?
I mean, I second the motion with Tara. Get these people some fucking Xanax. But other than that, seems about right.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess I can't... Oh yeah. What do we think of series antagonist Jaliel over there?
Kind of generic bad guy in a way. I don't necessarily get a whole lot of personality from him yet, but it's probably not the point at the moment, I imagine.
Yeah. I mean, that was actually something that I struggled with for a while, is actually figuring out who the villain is, what he believes, and why he's taking the actions that he's taking. But, again, I think we'll get more on him later.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I keep thinking of how Odium in Stormlight is characterized and introduced, where he just appears in the dreams, kind of similar to this, and immediately the people are He's described as this normal looking, just regular guy, a little bit kind of white hair, nice hair, isn't particularly imposing right off the bat, but when he talks, he just seems in control of the situation. This guy seems like he blusters a bit, but maybe that's just me.
All right. Well, I guess that could just be down to the presentation as well.
Hmm.
Anyway, yeah, I actually did have mention of this guy in previous chapters, but it's probably been so long. Okay, well, yeah, that's it. I got nothing else left.
All right then. Cameraman, what do you got for us?
Okay, so this is a newer idea I thought of not too long ago. This is parts of a chapter that I wrote. It's not all done yet, but it's enough I think that I can share. It's around 7 pages. 7 pages, 1,368 words. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Loud and clear.
So this is for a science fiction story. I recently decided I thought of it a while ago, but I decided to revisit it. It's called Starlight. I'm going to be reading to you. It's written in the form of a journal entry by this astronaut. So here it is. Journal entry, day 75 of exploration. Given that I'll almost certainly die on this mission, just like all other Starboys, I've decided I might as well write in a journal. That way, when raiders find my craft to rob me, they'll at least have something to remember me for. As I gaze out the window of this craft, I'm struck by the emptiness of space. There are no stars or constellations, just vast expanses of darkness. It's hard to imagine that there could be anything out here in the darkness, and quite frankly, I don't think there is. It's been 75 days since I left my colony to find the last star. I can't say that I haven't been a little nervous about what I might find out here. After all, every starboy to explore this region has never been seen again. Without any stars around me, it becomes impossible to tell what time it is. The only way I've kept track of dates is by carving tally marks into the wall. Whenever I try scanning for signs of life, I always find nothing across the silence of the void. I honestly don't see the point of this mission. If I didn't have a personal incentive to travel here, I'd probably stay home. I spend my time. I mostly monitor instruments in the cockpit while analyzing the data I collect. A shame I can't collect any data. It's a fairly solitary existence, but I've never been.
You cut out.
Where did I cut out?
Solitary data.
Yeah, oh yeah. It's a fairly solitary existence, but I've never been the relationship type. Ever since Jacob disappeared, I grew to enjoy my own company, as it gives me much more time with my thoughts. Many of the people back on my asteroid have wishes to one day see stars again, to see constellations that once guided sailors during the peak of civilization. But unlike Jacob, I never really had that much passion for exploration. I've always been more comfortable on the asteroid, a relatively easy life filled with technological wonders. Not exactly the unrelenting anarchy of uncharted void territories. As I close this journal entry, I'm reminded of how small we all are now that the end is near. It's quite obvious that the stars dying out is only the tip of the iceberg, whatever that used to mean. Sooner or later, everything will be gone. Every star, planet, asteroid, human, animal, and particle. But before our inevitable death, I will at least find Jacob so I can talk to him for one last time. Journal entry, day 76 of exploration. It's always hard to imagine that humanity used to be the dominant rulers of space. When our sun began to die, it's unknown whether Earth's star died before or after the rise of space travel. But what is known is that when it did, nothing of Earth was left. We all thought our troubles would end at the sun, but instead it grew worse. No one knew why, but every star stretching as far as the eye could see began to die. It was as if God was a demolition worker and the void was his latest assignment. Most of the remaining colonies descended into chaos, with vast expanses filled with outlaws and raiders. All of them seeking to take advantage of the approaching apocalypse. How pathetic. Some grew worried that this was the beginning of an alien invasion, but in reality, they probably watched a tad too many B-movies. During humanity's travels across the universe, no evidence of alien life, alive or dead, was found. Perhaps they were killed during the early stages of the darkness, but in my eyes, they were never real to begin with. Many others began to spread myths and legends of a better tomorrow. The most notable would be Starlight Station, a non-existent city orbiting the last known star in existence. Jacob sought out this paradise. Much to my dismissal, he seemed very adamant about going with someone I never really met before. He occasionally talked about a woman he had been seeing, but I never thought he'd leave the colony with her. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Nobody heard back from Jacob and this woman when they left. I tried to not let it bother me. I tried to spend time with other friends and focus on my mining job, but no matter what, my mind always came back to Jacob. Was he dead? Was he alive? Did he find Starlight? Did the woman do something terrible to him? I needed to find out. I enlisted in the Void Exploration League, a group of elite astronauts tasked with scanning the universe and finding a galaxy with stars. That way we could potentially rebuild human civilization and start over. I was never interested in all that, as my main goal is to track down Jacob. After 5 years of training, I received my craft, Helios-03, and ventured forth to make a difference for humanity. I even had machines that could help me, such as printers that could generate artificial foods, the sole reason why humanity hasn't starved to death. I have no idea why I'm even explaining this. Most people are smart enough to know info like this, and even the hypothetical raiders who kill me and steal this journal will know that. Maybe it's just a nervous habit I've developed. Maybe I don't want to die, and I want to just jot down whatever I'm feeling. Maybe I'm hoping this craft gets to Starlight so the residents can find the journal. Wait, what the hell am I saying? Why would I want to be found dead? And why would I want to be found out by a station that doesn't even exist? For all I know, Jacob is either dead or stranded. Not the residents of some fairy tale world. I'm not here to find a space station. I'm here to find my friend. You know what? I'm done writing for today. It's time to get back to the mission. Signing off for now. Okay, journal entry. Day 77, exploration. Day 77 of exploration. Day 77 of exploration. Message. We are here. Holy shit, I received a message. This is impossible. There shouldn't be any life in this galaxy. It can't be Starlight, but it has to be someone. I have not much else to talk about. I'm going to put this journal away and focus on finding this signal. Journal entry, day 78 of exploration. I've been trying to track down where the message came from, but it hasn't proved to be useful at all. Journal entry, day 79 of exploration. Where could this message come from? Could it actually be from Starlight? No, of course not. Don't be absurd, Thomas. It could be a trap, or it could be some other star boy. All I have to do is wait. Journal entry, day 80 of exploration. I received a message from the man who sent out from the person who sent out the prior message. I'm unsure whether I should open it. It could contain a virus that would destroy my craft, or it could be sent by raiders who would use it to track down my craft. I'll leave it unanswered for now, but if I answer it, I have a plan for if it's a trap. Journal entry, day 81 of exploration, part 1. Still haven't opened the message. Nothing else to report. Nothing around me at all. Pitch black. Why am I even here? Why would whoever sent me that message be here? Journal entry, day 81 of exploration, part 2. Fuck it. I'm opening the message. And I'll write down what it says. Journal entry, day 81 of exploration, part 3. To Helios 03. whoever you are, we're representatives of Starlight Station. We were tracking down any lost humans, and we found your signal. You sent out a signal scanning for life several weeks ago. We received it recently. Our apologies for the vagueness of our prime message. We didn't have a lot of time on our hands. We know where you are, and we'll be picking you up. Best regards, Starlight Station representative. Okay, journal entry. Day 81 of exploration, part 4. What? What the hell? And that's where I am at so far.
How dare you leave us on a cliffhanger? You
Sorry.
give us more of this stuff.
I'm gonna continue. Yeah, I'm gonna continue writing it. I'll present the next parts too during whatever we have our next meetings. But this is all I wrote so far. My apologies.
Oh no, I'm loving this.
I do like it too. This has got some. I do like the Star Trek vibes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Realized I was on. I have push to talk. No, dude, that was a great ass primer right over there. Like, holy crap, that was short, sweet, and simple. And I'm actually getting some Iron Lung vibes. If anyone's ever played it, or
I learned about Iron Lung after I thought of the idea, and I got a friend to like. I was talking to a few friends how I could not make it look like I'm plagiarizing Iron Lung.
I mean, to be fair, Iron Lung literally has the stars are still a thing in Iron Lung, but the general concept of the game, this is pretty good. It looks like a new take on a pretty cool idea, and I'd like it so far.
You cut out a bit.
Oh, well, you got the general gist of what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I like the idea. I like the concept. The presentation's even better. I have nothing else to say.
I was getting Dead Space vibes from it. Not like space zombies, but more like the audio or video files.
Yeah, like there's just something really, really ominous about floating out in the endless void of space with no signs of life anywhere, nobody to speak to or talking with, and just sort of out there, isolated.
I know, it sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine it might sound wonderful to someone like you. My God.
Well, come on, you would like to take your lady with you, wouldn't you?
I mean, it would be. I mean, then it would just be a ripoff of Cyberpunk, the Edge Runners.
Wait a second. So you watched Cyberpunk Edge Runners, but you haven't yet watched Arcane.
I am not going to watch Arcane because I don't watch crap.
And then he proceeds to watch Cyberpunk Edge Runners.
I liked Cyberpunk.
Yeah, that's fair.
Enjoy.
I don't actually think that.
If you're
Edge
going to
Runners was
insult
crap,
me,
I'm
insult
sorry.
me, Wissia. Come on. Don't
No,
back down.
because here's the thing. I can't insult you because then I would be a hypocrite because I actually thought that Cyberpunk Edge Runners was pretty good. Mostly. I don't know. The animation looked kind of cheap in a few scenes. Like, they just had stills and then characters talking over the stills and dialogue and such. And it felt extremely
we're not here for
cheap
that,
and
dude.
lazy.
We're not here for that.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So, any other thoughts for camera?
Keep it up, man.
Yeah, just get to work on that next one and see how we go from there.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what more you come up with.
Thanks. I have a lot of ideas of where to take it.
All right, well, yeah, let's see which one you go for, because there's a lot of potential over here.
Yeah, I do like space stories like this, where it's a just a lone man chronicling his thoughts. kind of feels a little bit like the first interstitial bits of Ender's Game, where you have this individual journal entries, I guess. But it's definitely unique. I would definitely agree. Let me see. Alrighty, so as of this point in time, in the second Dragonstrife, the evil sister Chimera has ostensibly won. She's the Dragonlord, and nobody's going to challenge her. And they're taking advantage of the relative peace of the situation to start building a massive canal that's going to greatly increase trade and improve the economy by quite a significant amount. However, one of the elves has seen a vision that it will cause the death of her people because it will be used to enhance troop movement capabilities. So she's going to try and destroy them. Another thing that has been a significant development is the discovery of gunpowder. Mostly just using it as an explosive to aid in the canal construction. But at some point, they will probably start formulating crude firearms out of it. Though admittedly, they do have dragons, which at the moment are quite a bit better than firearms, and will likely be so for a long, long time, though eventually ballistas will be replaced by cannons, which is, up to this point have been the primary long-range, high-powered artillery. Alrighty. Irissa flew above the human-orc camp. Her vision slightly alters as she surveyed the area through the eyes of a set of birds. She planned all this out to the smallest detail. She'd employed a number of bandit groups to slow the construction, then set up several strategic ambushes by her elves under cover of darkness. But for now, she had to scout the enemy camp for weaknesses. But perhaps if she could destroy their supply of that black powder. Abruptly, she noticed that there were two large tents with soldiers all around them, and there was no wildlife on the ground inside the camp that she could use to spy. Absently, she flew her eagle closer, only to have to evade several arrows from the soldiers on the ground as soon as she got close. They were probably hungry and saw a free meal. It looks like the west, where the mammoths are stabled, is the best place to attack, she thought, eyeing the four massive beasts with a critical eye. Animals that size were difficult to control, and she had considered doing that before seeing just how strong their restraints were. The handlers knew precisely how strong these animals were, and they weren't letting them roam free, especially when they could kill large numbers of people if they stampeded. Calmly, she turned the eagle and made it shriek 4 times. The signal for the attack rang out over the landscape, the wide, flat plain north of Rune and Althea. For a moment, from their hiding places in folds in the ground, 1,000 bandits appeared and charged the camp. She'd known where the convoy was going, so she'd had the bandits hide several miles beyond the scouts, or in emergencies had helped her servants to avoid the scouts so that they could remain undetected. As the bandits rushed the camp, the mammoths tossed their heads but didn't move due to their training and their manacles. Now let's see how they defend themselves, Irissa murmured as her minions got closer to the camp. We've made immense progress over the past few days, Arini remarked, Looking down at the map of the northern plains between the northern edge of Rune and the Iron Fort in the far north. Everything has been proceeding according to my plans. The mimics and their enormous plow, the direction of the canal, and this fantastic development of the blasting powder has brought us even greater momentum. Indeed, and with all the resources provided by all the kingdoms, we will all begin to make profit very quickly after its completion. Shard tapped his fingers against his elbow, arms crossed casually, as well as cause the kingdom to prosper. It seems like you see the latter as an afterthought. Irini's tone had a mild element of reproach. Yes, because I see the good of my own before everyone else. Shard tilted his head. What I want is for me and my family to be advanced, whether through position or wealth, it makes no matter really. Do you actually believe that? Irini tilted her head and frowned at him. What meaning is there in life? The thrill of victory, Shard said calmly, resting his fingers on the map, even if it's fleeting. The euphoria of success, however temporary, and the knowledge that what you've done will have lasting consequences. Lasting consequences? Not doing something that will allow you to be remembered? Irini's eyes narrowed slightly. Our memory will eventually die, Irini, Shard whispered. The only thing that truly matters is what you do in this life. Any effect that we have on the histories afterward is fleeting. And after you die, there is nothing beyond you. What about Aemond and Alysanne? Honey, Magar and her sons, Arion the Kinslayer, Aeborn and his conspiracy, Odin Whitehand, Darion the Peacemaker, Irini said mildly. You have the potential to write your name just as large as anyone else. What is a legacy but what other people think of you? Shard asked. I don't really care what other people think of me. What I care about is what I think of myself. Irini's frown deepened. You don't care what I think about you? She asked. I know what you think of me, Shard shrugged, and I am comfortable with how you think of me. What matters is if you trust me or not. Thoughts are ephemeral and fade away. What doesn't is the bond between us, and the bonds are formed by knowledge. Irini's frown slowly turned to a smile. Nice recovery. I didn't need to recover anything that I feel secure in. Shard smiled and pulled off his glove so he could stroke her face. She accepted his touch and leaned into his hand. Shard's ears instinctively flicked back as the sounds of men charging the camp reached him. Not waiting for anything else, Shard ran out of the tent, quickly followed by Irini. Bandits, he remarked, whistling for Wolfheart. Wickering, the large gray stallion, rode over to him, stamping his hooves eagerly. Irini ran over to her own horse and gracefully swung into the saddle. I'll go get with the archers, she said quickly. You take command of the Orcs and the Altheans. Shard nodded and pulled himself into his saddle, waving his arm and calling for the men to get ready for battle. The orcs rushed out of their barrack wagons and tents, some grabbing halberds from racks, while others simply drew their maces, axes, and elegant cleaver-like swords. The soldiers who weren't already on watch quickly strapped on their armor and picked up weapons, while the workmen moved into the center and picked up the new pump-action crossbows that Irini had designed. Shard quickly got to the side of the camp that was facing the bandits, drawing Dark Fate from her scabbard and wading toward the orcs. Growling, the orcs lowered their spears, the long pikes creating a thicket of spear tips. The human and orc archers knocked arrows to string and prepared to loose, while the crossbows flicked the levers under their crossbows and their quarrels. Gorjad Barznul! He yelled, gesturing to the orcs. Pounding their chests in approval, the orcs parted to allow the Deathwalkers to charge Arjad onto the field toward the enemy. They only had about 200 of the elite Berserker class of orcs, but those would be enough to do serious damage before the cavalry swept in. Bellowing, the large orc warriors surged forward, spreading out to allow their brethren more room to swing their enormous T-shaped swords. Casually, Shard motioned to the archers, then strung his own horsebow. As the archers raised their weapons, the humans with their crossbows, the orcs with their large longbows. In one volley, the orcs arrows and bolts were loosed into the massive bandits. With disciplined ease, the well-trained crossbowmen loosed their bolts in waves, each range dropping back through the lines to the back to allow themselves to quickly reload, using their carefully constructed pump-action devices. The Yorks, though, did even more damage. Their longbows were so powerful that only someone this size that Aemond or Megara were purported to be could have pulled it back. When they struck a bandit, they fell backward as if struck by a fist, shift the thickness of one of Shard's fingers jutting out of their body. Now that the enemy's front ranks have been softened for the real butchery, the Gorjab Barznul all slammed into the enemy, swinging their massive swords in a whirl of steel almost too fast to track. It was a gruesome kind of mesmerizing. Blood sprayed through the air as bodies fell to the ground, many in two pieces from the force of a single strike. A few of the bandits wore armor, and those managed to hold up the Deathwalkers longer than most, but they kept on falling. Several men attempted to band together and even managed to fell a dozen or so of the berserkers, but only half died in the attempt. But often half died in the attempt. Cavalry! Shard his dark fate and gestured over his head before sheathing the sword and pulling his horsebow off its tie. Silently, he nudged Wolfheart forward. Neighing eagerly, the gray warhorse reared and took off at a gallop, followed quickly by the rest of his horsemen. With practiced efficiency, Shard put an arrow to the string and started loosing arrows along with the other horse archers. The bandits rapidly began breaking as the archers began peppering them with arrows, allowing the Gorjab Barznul to slice through them. As soon as they started breaking, Shard spurred his horse forward toward one of the fleeing bandits. Carefully, he began searching out the ones with the nicest equipment, then crippled them with carefully aimed arrows to the legs. Several fell, clutching their wounded calves and thighs, while others were ridden down as the horse archers switched to lances and swords. "Any that have my arrows in their legs, leave for questioning," Shard yelled, circling one of them and pinning his arm to the ground with a shaft. The man shrieked in pain, the arrow going right through his arm bones and sinking into the sod. Narrowing his eyes, Shard slipped his horse and placed his foot on the man's pinned arm. "All right," Shard remarked to his fallen opponent as his riders started rounding up the injured. "It's time for you to start talking." Arissa pulled her mind back from the eagle. Now that she knew their full strength, then he would be able to attack with her real army. The human bandits had all been slain or captured, but they were disposable. Probably would have died in a few years anyway, she thought unconcernedly. Irene folded her arms as the bandits were dragged into the camp, many of them struggling against the orcs holding them. "These are the leaders?" she asked, nodding to Shard. She didn't try to hide her distaste. These men had attempted to destroy her dream, her life's work, her legacy. Her intended casually drew his sword and placed it against the shoulder of one of the bandits. "Indeed," he said, voice strangely blithe, considering what he was probably about to do. "Now, friends, why don't you start talking before I start removing pieces? First, why did you attack this operation, and who hired you to do it?" The bandits swallowed in unison, but didn't say anything. Casually, Shard drove his sword directly through the man's shoulder without any change of expression. The man screamed and writhed as Shard yanked his blade to the side, almost as if he were carving a turkey, a large rent like a second mouth in his shoulder, spurting blood. Clearly in agony, the bandit started to sag from the blood loss, but one of the orcs quickly put a red-hot iron to the wound, cauterizing it. "Start talking." Shard casually slid his sword across the cheek of another poor soul or bandit. Dark Fate's blade drawing a line of red where she touched flesh. "Again, why did you attack this operation, and who hired you?" "I don't know if you're the correct person to do this, my love," Irene remarked, motioned to Gordaz, her bodyguard, to run to her tent. "Please, fetch my instruments." Shard paused and retracted his blade, then pulled out a kerchief and cleaned his blade. Very well. You are the Dragonlord's sister, and in command of this venture, so I will defer to your judgment. Nodding in acknowledgement, Irene waited for Gordaz to bring the large box that contained her tools. In the time that I have had to plan my grand endeavor, my mother advised me to learn how to make small things so I could build larger ones, she remarked, opening up the box and pulling out a metal glove with screws built into it. So for a long time I made various different tools, mostly practical things, new hammer designs, improved crossbow mechanisms, new forges, that sort of construction. Casually, she placed the glove on one unfortunate bandit's hand and started tightening the screws. However, after seeing the implements used by the Royal Inquisitors, I was appalled at how uncreative and inefficient the implements were. She looked into the eyes of her intended victim and deliberately allowed a smile to cross her face as she began tightening the screws. You will experience great pain as I start tightening the screws. There's magic in them, too. Dragonlord magic, like the kind that Odin Whitehand used to. Secrets of, "It was an elf woman!" The bandit screamed before she could do more than slightly turn the knob. "She said we'll be paid well for the heads of the leaders. Damn woman lied to us." Well, now, Shard's eyes narrowed to describe her. Dark skin, like someone from Haraga Rulbar. And it babbled, beautiful, slim, like an elf. Now that is interesting. Shard tapped the flat of his now clean blade against the man's cheek. Any other information to give? As if he could stave off execution, the man began to babble, as did the rest. However, most of it was completely inane nonsense that had nothing of value. Finally, Shard had the orcs throw them out of camp. Each man hobbled to the man behind him. I was surprised that you had a taste for that sort of thing, Shard said mildly as the wretches stumbled into the darkness. But then, when you said Dragonlord magic, then I knew that you were bluffing. Oh, this is just an aesthetic piece, Irene remarked, placing the glove back in the chest. Not really anything that would harm anyone. I assumed as much. Shard glanced at the box. Are there other aesthetic pieces in there? No, there are actual devices that can be used to cause pain, but I've had a few ideas of simple ways to drive someone mad without harming their body. Irene shrugged, closing the box and motioning for Gordaz to take her chest away. But I haven't had the chance to test them. I imagine that Chimera will give you ample opportunities to test your toys. Shard's voice was quite matter-of-fact. Not disgusted, just calm and accepting. Do you think that she'll be a good ruler? Irene asked. I worry about her sometimes. She will be the ruler we need during this time, Shard shrugged. However, his eyes betrayed the slight flicker of emotion. An unclear emotion, but an emotion. We need to support her and root out any traitors. I know, I just want to help her to not implode on everyone. Irene started popping her knuckles. She needs as much support as possible, and she needs allies. I've been working on that. Shard stroked the hilt of his sword. I have in mind to start a tradition of an annual visit to each of the kingdoms, ensuring that they have an ability to speak candidly with the Dragonlord. At the moment, we are all united in a common cause with this Grand Canal, though I will send for more troops. Althea is closest to us, and my sister's cavalry will arrive quicker than any other force. Rune is very close to us? Irene immediately regretted saying that. Shard's eyes narrowed, expression becoming colder than midwinter in the far north. He didn't say anything, though. Forget I said anything. She said quickly, wrapped her arms around him to try and comfort him. He absently patted her back, but it was a perfunctory gesture. Shard took her face in his hands and leaned it back. Don't ever mention that to me again. Ernie swallowed, then nodded. All right. And that's all for today.
All right. Interesting.
Hang on.
Unless
We got
somebody else
a chat
speak
bot.
first.
Oh, it's a Twitch bot. I see. Valiant Wolfheart. Yeah, Wolfheart's a good horse. He's a good boy. Any thoughts?
I'm trying to gather up mine right now.
I do question. Oh, sorry. Go on. Yeah.
No, you go first.
I do question how effective just telling soldiers to ignore the orcs that have arrows in their knees is going to be in a battle situation. That seems like a lot of thinking that you're asking your soldiers to do when their lives are literally on the line.
Oh, true. I was just thinking that these guys are en route, and they're just saying the thing, just grab anybody that's incapacitated.
I'm just thinking I can see that would be something that I could see. It's the
phrasing could be better.
It seems a little specific for something in the heat of battle. Something much simpler. Remember, we need prisoners or something like that.
Okay, round up. Yeah, maybe round up the injured, maybe.
Or just spare the wounded, kill everyone else, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that actually works. Okay, I can put that in.
Or leave the wounded. We need their information. Or just something that's quick. That's the point. Quick doesn't require a lot of thinking.
Yeah. Let's see. I liked the little chat earlier on in the chapter about the subject of legacy. That was pretty nice. I'm not sure if I would call it very profound, but I imagine it definitely portrays this particular character as wise and intelligent, which I imagine is the goal. So, there's that.
To a certain extent, he's also very cynical.
Oh yeah, there's that as well. It could be taken that way.
Yeah, kind of the idea is he's been kind of thinking about this he's starting to feel like, wow, there is really no point to what stuff I leave behind. There's just after you die, like even the satisfaction of success is really fleeting. So what's the point in it?
Yeah, almost feels a bit nihilistic in a sense.
Mm-hmm. And it's very different than his fiance. His fiance has a much better opinion.
Well, much brighter opinion on it, I'd imagine.
Yeah, definitely much brighter opinion. As opposed to him, he very much just says in many ways he's just trying to build his own house for later. And there's actually a very, very good reason why he talks about traitors is because he's thinking of framing people that he doesn't particularly like and using the Dragonlord, who's exceptionally paranoid, as a cat's paw while leaving himself completely clean.
Yeah, that was a lot of thought going into all this political machinations.
Yeah, it won't be shown, but since there's going to be a time jump in a few chapters, but essentially a lot of it is built around he is very, very driven toward self-advancement, and he doesn't fully believe in morality. He's
that's kind of a no shit statement over there.
Yeah, like he's been very much. There are certain moral standards he's fine with keeping, but mostly no. I think the main scruple he has is I won't be unfaithful to my wife. That's the main line he will not cross, but he'll cross pretty much every other line.
Well, just like Hades, at least he's a good husband.
Yeah.
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 It kind of just occurred to me that maybe the reason why I was so uncomfortable earlier is because I was thinking, like, oh no, what if my parents hear me reading any of this shit aloud?
Totally possible.
Because I was like, I was kind of embarrassed of that possibility, despite me having the door locked behind me at all times.
Makes sense. Well, I got to get going. I got to put on Kung Pao for the Discord. So we'll have to call it good for today. I'm not totally sure what we'll be doing. Maybe we'll watch more of the Tarzan, the Epic Adventures show, which is going to be so fun. It's going to be great. I'm so excited. It's going to be the most amazing crap ever, and I love it.
And we're all going to be here for it.
Alrighty. See you guys later. Bye.
Hey, see ya.
See you guys.
Enough! Kill me! Just end